You have found Authentic Business Adventures, the business program that brings you the struggles, stories, and triumphant successes of business owners across the land. Past episodes of the Authentic Business Adventures program can be found in the podcast link at drawincustomers.com. We are coming to you from the Sun Prairie Community Radio Studios, underwritten by Bank of Sun Prairie. My name is James Kademan, business coach at Draw In Customers Business Coaching, co-owner of Calls on Call, Shared Receptionist Services, as well as the author of the Bold Business book, available on Amazon. Today, we're welcoming / preparing to learn from Bob Mahnke of Graphite. Bob, how are things going today?
Going great. It's a beautiful day in September, Wisconsin.
It is fantastic.
Other than the Viking game last night.
Yeah, you'll have that, right? You know, my sister lives in Calgary, and she just sent a picture this past week saying, hey, we got our first snowfall.
Oh.
So I'm like, okay, things could be worse.
Yeah.
Mosquitoes are bad here, but at least we don't have to shovel them. Or I guess maybe we don't.
Yeah.
They're kind of close.
They're getting thick.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us, what is Graphite and what do you guys do?
All right. So Graphite is a what's called an Apple Premier Partner. So long ago, before the Apple stores ever existed, all the Apple products were sold through a dealer channel,
Okay.
which we're actually called a reseller, even though we're not reselling used product mostly,
Sure.
but it's that's just the term that Apple uses for the dealer channel.
Sure.
And as of about 15 years ago, there were probably about 3,000 Apple dealers in the country.
Okay.
That number is now down to about 250 total locations.
Really?
With about 100 owners.
So is the reason, why is that?
Well, the Apple Store put most of them out of business.
Okay.
As Apple rolled out their store concept.
Sure.
A lot of those dealers that were involved almost exclusively in retail.
Sure.
They just couldn't, found they couldn't compete. So
Right.
in order to stay alive and viable in today's world with Apple, you have to diversify. And so we, since we originally kind of came out of the business-to-business consulting model,
Sure.
we utilized that to grow. And then we actually, never did retail. As a matter of fact, we started one of the first non-storefront Apple dealers in the country.
Oh, wow.
We were the one and only. And that led to many good things with working within the Apple channel, but eventually, as we've become more involved and tighter with Apple, we actually had to they kind of forced us into opening up retail locations.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So you have the one retail location now?
Actually, two.
Two, okay.
The one is off Vogues Road, not really what I would consider a prime retail location,
Sure.
but we do a tremendous amount of walk-in traffic because it's so close to the interstate, and we get a lot of customers either coming up from Rockford, Janesville, or from the north.
Sure.
And it's very easy on and off the interstate. So
Nice. And then you have a second one as well.
yeah, and that's on University Avenue.
Okay.
Right in the same the University Shopping Center, just past University Hospitals.
Okay, so near campus, near the hospitals, all that jazz. Okay.
Yep.
Nice. So how has that been working or adding this retail that you maybe didn't necessarily want, so to speak?
It's been mixed. It's having the combination of service, which Apple kind of views service as a separate entity from sales.
Okay.
Even though from our perspective they go hand in hand.
Sure.
Excuse me. But having both of those, they're both very viable to one another.
Sure. Okay. So how long ago did you start Graphite?
Graphite is now in its 22nd year.
Is it really?
Yeah.
And did you start it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So you started Graphite, was the intention to be Apple exclusive?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
Originally, it started off. I was originally part of a company called Kestrel, which
okay.
was we were also an Apple dealer. That was the company that we were actually the first non-storefront Apple dealer.
Okay.
'Cause back in that day, it started off with the late kind of in the Apple IIs. It was kind of around the time when the first Macintosh came out.
A lot has happened in 22
And,
years.
yeah, it was originally kind of what we called the desktop publishing revolution. Apple came out with the first black and white laser printer, under $10,000, and those first Macs were $3,000 or $4,000 a piece, and that eventually led into kind of the traditional world of pre-press, which was where an artist would design the page, a company would print it, but in the middle there was pre-press where kind of all the magic happened, where they did the color separation, got the page and, was able to separate it into 4-color so that it could go to print. And so we were very heavily involved in that original pre-press industry. It's kind of a unique industry in that it only lasted about 20 years. Yeah. It grew, and, literally there's only a few stragglers that are still doing what would be considered traditional pre-press work. Most of that is done at the printer stage, and tools like Adobe Creative Cloud have given the artists the ability to take that work a lot further along in line and basically just produce a PDF that they send to the printer.
Sure. So I was going to college at the time for graphic design.
Stout?
I went to Stout for a year, Eau Claire for a few years, yep. So Stout was, I got kicked out of Eau Claire, so they told me to go to Stout, which is totally fine. So at any rate, it's interesting that because pre-press was a big thing back then.
Yep.
And I don't want to say that I could see in the crystal ball kind of thing, but you could kind of tell that this has to be dated, that it can't last forever, kind of like looking at a record. You just know that.
Although records are coming back.
Sure. I guess there's no vintage sound with the pre-press or anything.
Yes.
But it just felt like one more step, and it's another set of people that you have to take care of: HR, computers, expense, training, all that jazz.
Yeah.
That I felt like could be eliminated.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting because we were selling, fairly expensive Macintosh, high-end systems.
Sure.
A typical, we kind of started in the era of the Mac II.
Oh, sure.
Which was a, kind of a large pizza box-shaped computer that a fully loaded Mac II was about $6,000, and then we'd stick about $6,000 of memory into it. So that was 64 megabytes of RAM.
Oh, nice.
Not gigabytes, megabytes of RAM for another about $6,000.
Holy cow.
And that's what, artists or pre-press companies were using to be able to separate film, So, yeah, now that I've got more power in my watch than those computers.
I was gonna say, even the computers that we have now for answering phones, I make sure they have a minimum of 16 gig.
Yeah.
So that's crazy how memory has changed. Yeah.
And so, but at the time when we first got started, it was we were competing against a company called Cytex. And Cytex had equipment that, on average, a typical workstation for a Cytex operator was close to $1 million.
Really?
And we were putting in a $25,000 to $35,000 Mac setup that was doing everything that Cytex could do.
Wow.
And so
Cytex was a national company?
Cytex was a global company. They were actually, I believe they're out of Israel.
Oh, really?
And very, very prominent. Matter of fact, Wyden, which is still one of our customers today, at one point in time, they were the largest Cytex shop in the world. Huh. They had a very large operation, probably, I don't know if it was 10 or 15 Cytex workstations, and they were doing all of that high-end pre-press work.
Sure.
And, eventually we converted them all over to Macs. As a matter of fact, we actually competed against Wyden when we set up Shopco up in Green Bay. And we went in, and they were producing a Sunday circular, the thing you get in what used to be called a newspaper.
Yeah, right. Back in the day. Remember those?
And it was kind of ironic because they came to us and said, well, we want to do this. We know we have to do this. We've got to, we're either going to go to, some Cytex workstation and spend millions of dollars, or we're going to go all Mac and start producing the Sunday circular. And at the time, it was all being done by hand.
Sure.
So they were literally cutting and pasting and, splicing film together to produce that Sunday circular.
Sure.
So we did it. We had to do 2 weeks consecutively, because they felt that if they missed getting that Sunday circular, this always kind of blew me away, that if they missed getting that Sunday circular published and in the newspaper, they would lose about $1 million in revenue.
Oh, I bet. Sure.
And which kind of floored me, because I usually take that pile and just put that out in the burn pile.
Still, but you see it, right?
you do see it. I actually look at the Menards one.
But.
Sure. So we did that. They actually produced simultaneously a traditionally produced one and one produced on the Mac.
Oh, wow.
And then after the third week, they converted totally over to the Mac.
All right.
But I remember Cytex was in there really giving them the hard sell.
Sure.
And
spend millions of dollars with us, why don't you?
Yep.
Okay.
So that's kind of where we got the start, was in that that high-end publishing film. And of course, with the Mac still today being the prominent tool of graphic artists, we still have a lot of our clientele that are in that,
Sure.
that creative artistic space.
Sure. So was it tough at the point that 22 years ago, you were working for a company that essentially did this?
Well, yeah, Kestrel was the company that started. A couple of buddies of mine, Carl Lang and Dan Dudovic, we started the company. We were actually, oddly enough, all working at American TV.
Oh, really?
And
Okay.
yeah, American TV at one time had an Apple store within. It was kind of a store within a store, and we were hired to start the business to business development portion of that.
Sure.
And it was going great. We were doing a lot of really good things, but working inside the warehouse structure of American TV just became very burdensome. Like, an example, you'd have to go get a customer would come in and want to get a cable, and it could take a half an hour of doing the paperwork, going back to the warehouse, getting that order pulled, fulfilled, stuff like that.
Sure.
And so we actually went to the owners of American TV and asked, hey, this is a great concept. We got the right people. Can we do this with a little more autonomy?
Sure.
And they said no, retail was where they were, and they didn't really want to change.
All right.
And so the three of us broke off and started Kestrel.
Oh, interesting.
And that lasted for about 4 years.
Okay.
And that was due to a couple of very bizarre circumstances.
Okay.
One being we built a new building for about 20 people. But with about 20 offices.
Wow.
And we got duped by an electrician that
Okay.
totally botched the wiring. And when the building inspector, we had actually moved in, and we're in there about a week, and everything we started plugging in, circuit breakers would start popping.
Oh, no.
And turns out the electrician was some fly-by-night guy, took his money, but he just totally botched. So when the building inspector came in, they shut us down for 6 months, and we literally had to tear the drywall off of every wall in the building and rewire the place. So that
Sure.
set us back not only $100,000 in work, but also 6 months in time.
Sure.
And we literally had about $500,000 worth of AGFA equipment. AGFA was a large player in that pre-press world, so they sold high-end scanners, image setters, which were devices that put basically that printed onto film that were then transposed onto the plates that went onto the printing press. And so we became one of the first electronic-only AGFA resellers, and we were doing really well because we had all this experience with the Mac end of things. And the traditional AGFA dealers were selling, the guys that were kind of like order taker salespeople that would go out and take orders for, printing chemistry, printing blankets, all of this type of stuff, big orders of film. And, they were doing $20-30 million a year with AGFA. And along came this small little company that had all this expertise. And the traditional dealers for AGFA went up the good old boy club and said, hey, you got to get rid of this Kestrel guy, this Kestrel gang. They're a thorn in our side.
Sure.
And so they tried to do that.
Oh.
And we literally had like 5 sales on the table for between $250,000 and $500,000 a piece. And they went to all of those customers and said, hey, we're deauthorizing Kestrel. You're gonna have to buy from somebody else. And it was
really?
it was a blatant violation of some Wisconsin Fair Dealer Act law. But the owner of the company decided that he didn't want to fight the fight.
Okay.
And so he pulled the plug on the financing, and somehow miraculously I just ended up with the Apple dealership out of the deal.
All right.
So I broke off and started Graphite.
Sure. Did the other two guys?
Carl went on. He actually went to work for Apple and for Sony and Epson.
Okay.
He currently still does a lot of work for Apple. He actually travels all over the world and calibrates all the digital presses that Apple uses when they publish all their photos, or if you send in and get a book printed by Apple. He actually travels to Japan, Germany, and he's in charge of calibrating all those presses. So he's still
interesting.
He also developed several very high-end color calibrated monitors for Sony and Epson.
Okay.
Or Sony and Radius was the company that had a color calibrated monitor. So he's a brilliant color scientist, and actually he's where I learned a lot of my core knowledge for what I still do today.
Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So how did you land on the name for Graphite?
It was kind of interesting. We, graphite is, we kind of took it from the lead of the pencil.
Sure.
And, the element in lead in the pencil. And, because we were kind of catering toward that creative thing, we ended up taking the crown, that crown logo off of a pencil and came up with the term graphite.
Sure.
It sounded kind of techy.
All right.
At the time, it didn't have Apple in it.
Sure.
And today Apple won't actually let you change your name to something that has Mac or Apple in it. They want everybody to be autonomous. But those those dealers that did already have Apple in their name, they were able to kind of keep it in there.
Gotcha.
So
okay. Interesting.
So it'd probably be a little handier today to have called it, Bob's Apple Shop or
Sure. No, graphite's cool. Graphite's totally cool. So 22 years, that means that you've seen the iPads come out, the iPods come out, the iPhones come out, and all that jazz.
Yep.
So how has that changed your business? Going through that transition of desktop more to portable.
The phone is the one Apple product that we don't sell. We sell virtually everything else, and we do service all the iPhones.
Okay.
So the service on the iPhones has been just tremendous. I mean, we are literally booked full with iPhone service.
I bet they're easy to drop.
Yep. A lot of cracked screens. A lot of Apple had a recall on their batteries, and so through the end of this year, Apple still offers a $29 battery replacement that anybody with literally any phone, even if the battery's not failing, you can bring it in and get your battery replaced.
Oh, nice. So, okay. That's cool. So is it tough to find technicians for stuff like that?
It is, although Apple has really good training resources. So we're able to take somebody, with virtually no experience and have them, at least replacing batteries in iPhones in a few weeks. Sure. We've got some very skilled technicians. Actually, several of our technicians have come from the Apple Store. We have a more of a traditional business model. We're not in a mall. Sure. We're not open till 9 o'clock at night. We're not open 365 days a year. Sure. So the work schedule can be a lot more amenable for a guy that's starting a family or something like that.
Sure. So. Interesting. So the volume of clients that you have that are B2B versus the normal consumer, is it 50-50 or would you say?
Well, I'd say there's probably more customers on the consumer side, but volume-wise, because our support services is really where the money is. There's not a ton of margin in selling Apple products. You'll probably see that there's very little wiggle room. If you go online. Oh yeah. Every Apple product is pretty much priced on parity. Sure. You may see a Sam's Club or a Costco or something discounting it a little bit. Sure. But they're doing that, or even a Best Buy. But they're doing it totally as a loss leader to get customers in the door to to buy some other product or service from them.
Sure, and I imagine Apple governs a lot of that. I would guess.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Apple keeps very tight reins on and it would be pretty, if you violated it, it'd be pretty easy to get deauthorized by Apple if you.
That'd be a bad day. All right. So how hard would it be to start a business like yours now? Just because I imagine the barrier to entry to get Apple's blessing is probably pretty steep now.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I don't think Apple's even entertaining taking on new dealers. Okay. They have authorized some service locations because of the massive volume of iPhones in particular. The need for service in a lot of locations has just grown exponentially for Apple. Okay. So but as far as I know, for at least the last 5 or probably even 10 years, Apple has not opened up the channel to any new dealers. Okay. Now some places have acquired other dealers. Sure. And there's a couple of players that have, I think there's one dealer in our channel that has about 45 locations. Oh, wow. So they were, it's called Simply Mac. Okay. And they were, at one time, they actually had about 90 locations. Huh. And about 2 years ago, they downscaled dramatically. Okay. And their mode of operation is typically to open in locations where Apple stores aren't. Okay. So for a while, they had a location in Rockford, for example.
Oh, sure.
Okay. And, but they kind of closed down all the non-performing stores, and kind of scaled back pretty dramatically. So
Gotcha. Okay. So now with Graphite, are you the sole owner?
I am.
You are.
Yep.
Okay. You've owned it for 22 years.
Yep.
All right. So what have been some things that you've learned over the course of those 22 years?
A lot of things. I love, and the reason I got started into business, I think, the reason we're still here is that, I really believe in doing the right thing for the customer. It's you have to put profit out of the way when, and you really got to, help. We do a tremendous amount of helping the customer make the right decision.
Sure.
And you just have to be honest and have a lot of integrity when you do that. And I've really tried to push that down through the all the employees, and we've kind of grown that culture.
Sure.
And so once customers find us, they're like, oh, I never have to go back to the Apple store again. It's literally, we get that on a daily basis almost. They're like,
well, that's
this
awesome.
is, this is so cool that I found you, because
Sure.
I go to that Apple store and I'm just, it's just chaos.
Sure.
And so they
just
can
because
come,
of so many people.
yeah,
Or
yeah. I mean, and I'll give a lot of kudos to the Apple store to handle the volume that they do. They've got an excellent system that gets people checked in. Sets them up comfortable, but coming into Graphite's like in a whole nother world. It's just you get a lot more personal attention.
Okay, that's very cool. And how many employees do you have now?
So we're up to I think 13 or 14 now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's been tough to find.
It's getting tougher. Yeah,
Okay.
with the economy cranking the way it is, and fast food places paying $15 an hour now. It is getting tougher to find, particularly skilled employees.
Sure.
And we operate in a, kind of a unique space, especially on the support side, where we're supporting Macintoshes with a lot of times within a Windows environment. So a lot of our customers are, there'll be a small marketing group within a company.
Sure.
And they'll have 10 or 12 Mac users, and the company may have 600 PCs. Well, the IT department,
Gotcha.
they don't want to have anything to do with the Macs.
Right.
They've got their hands full with trying to keep all the PCs running, keeping the viruses off of the PCs. So they typically will just contract with us to handle all the Mac support.
Oh, that's good.
And so that part of the business is really where it's at. But finding people with that skill set, there just aren't a lot of them out there.
Sure.
So,
And is that just universally in regards to IT or Apple specific?
yeah, I think, a lot of the training in the tech schools and stuff for IT is all around either networking and infrastructure or Windows based.
Sure.
There's Apple has not really, brought forth. Now, once you're an employee at Graphite and you have a lot of resources to all of the Apple training material from within Apple, which is all excellent stuff. So if you're somebody that has a pretty good skill set,
Sure.
a good solid understanding of Macs and or networking infrastructure, we've taken PC guys and trained them,
Sure.
to deal with Macs.
Sure.
So, once they find out how much easier it is to deal with Macs and how much, they tend to be a lot more stable computer.
Gotcha.
But it's also, the users tend to have a lot more flexibility and their needs for software and things can be a lot more than a typical PC user as well.
Okay.
So,
Can you elaborate on that a little?
yeah. Again, dealing with apps like Adobe Creative Cloud. So it's Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, Acrobat, as well as all the video editing, website building. So all of the software companies now have moved to a model of selling a subscription service,
Sure.
as
Software
opposed
as a
to you
service,
buying Adobe Creative Suite, which came with 4 applications. You now pay monthly, and you have access to all the Adobe apps.
Sure.
So there's also a lot of fonts involved in the creative world. So they these artists and designers are used to having thousands of fonts on their computer to be able to pick and choose and design stuff. So keeping all of that managed and keeping all that software running.
Sure.
And then they just tend to have they need to be able to send files to different printers. They need whereas a typical PC user may be using Microsoft Word and Excel and an email, or a typical graphic artist is going to have 15, 20, 30 different apps on their computer.
Sure.
So it adds to the complexity of it.
Oh, I bet.
And then also, the ability to network those Macs into a Windows infrastructure. So a lot of times they'll have PC-based servers.
Sure.
And we have to be able to get the Macs to communicate into those.
Gotcha.
Into that network.
Does Apple have servers anymore?
They're scaling back.
Okay.
They had for quite a while. They had the Xserve, which was literally a server grade piece of equipment. They did away with that back in I want to say 2006, 2007.
Okay, so it's been a while. All right.
Yeah, it's been quite a while. And then they had the Mac Mini, which still had the server software. And then about 3 years ago, they scaled the Mac Mini back.
Okay.
And so now they're actually phasing out a lot of the functionality of the actual server component of the operating system.
But I suppose realistically, until you get into serious enterprise type stuff, with cloud computing, do most businesses really need a server?
The graphic artists do, because the internet speeds are still not here yet to be able to store and save files in the cloud.
Okay.
So as we start to get gigabit Ethernet or gigabit fiber to our doorstep, which is happening up here in Sun Prairie.
Sure. Slowly.
One of my old employees, Bob Budding, lived here and actually worked at this radio station. And he had 300 by 300 fiber to his house.
Oh, nice.
And was paying $79 a month. Meanwhile, I live outside of Stoughton.
Yeah.
And I had the slowest Pony Express DSL you could ever imagine.
Sure.
But as we get those higher speeds, the ability to store stuff in the cloud will be there. But as of today, most businesses still have either Charter, which is 100 meg down and 5 meg up, or some some iteration of that. So it's really not enough speed to store particularly large graphic files.
Okay.
Again, if you were storing a Word or an Excel document, no problem. When you're storing a 200 meg file that you've been working on, that's a different story.
No, I get that. That makes sense, because every once in a while when I edit some of the videos that I make, that's just, cloud is for when it's done.
Yes.
Not for in the process of editing.
Correct.
So, okay, that makes sense.
Yep.
That makes sense.
Yeah, particularly if you're editing in 4K, the amount of data in a 4K video today is just astronomical. So you want to be able to edit that, scale it down to what your audience is going to be if you're going to be sharing it on the web.
Sure.
Then it's a reasonable file that you can transfer.
Gotcha. Okay. So you started Graphite. Your other guys went off and did their own thing. Did you start with employees right away?
No. Nope.
Okay.
I actually started working out of my house.
Okay. You didn't take on the building with electrical issues?
No.
They tear that down, or is it?
No, it's still there. Another company came in and moved in, and we actually fixed all the wiring.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. So we actually paid to have the wiring done, and we were still in there for about a year, and that was before AGFA kind of did their thing to us. But so no, I broke off. I had a couple of young boys at the time. Okay. So I was able to work from home.
Sure.
We had a nanny, so I could kind of focus on my work and stuff.
Sure.
But probably for 5 or 6 years at least, I worked out of the house.
Sure.
And just mainly as a kind of an independent consultant.
Okay.
But I had that Apple medallion in my back pocket, so I could still, slowly. And at the time, the requirements, because Apple had really gone through, Apple, as most people know, almost went bankrupt.
Yeah, well, yeah.
In the 80s, and took a bailout of, literally $150,000 from Microsoft to keep Apple in business.
Yep.
And now they're $1 trillion company. I mean,
that blows my mind.
It's kind of mind-boggling. But,
to say the least.
So, needless to say, Apple, was doing whatever they could to survive, and the requirements and the oversight that they provided to a dealer was pretty minimal. So, I just
sell something, please.
Yeah. It was pretty easy to maintain.
Sure.
As a matter of fact, I think you only had to do like $25,000 a year to keep your Apple dealership.
Okay.
So,
when you're selling $6,000 computers,
yeah,
that's not that many. Okay.
Right. Yep.
Gotcha. All right.
So.
So the majority of the work that you were doing was essentially on site, I imagine.
Correct.
At that time, okay.
Yep. Yeah. Again, mostly graphic arts companies, pre-press companies. Back there used to be another business called a service bureau.
Okay.
I don't know if you remember that, but there were companies like Port to Print.
Oh, sure.
They basically were the kind of I'd call it a stage before a traditional pre-press shop, but they would have laser printers that you'd be able to take your files in and have them printed. They would do some level of pre-press, but typically it was more small business and consumer, whereas the higher end pre-press shops would be doing more of your catalog and magazine work and things like that.
Sure.
So
at what point did you decide that it's time to add employees?
when I got too busy.
Okay. All right.
So, firstly, I hired a kind of a receptionist office manager.
Okay.
She actually worked in the house.
Okay.
And, so that worked out. Basically, I've always felt, and we still do, that I always felt it very important to have a human answer the phone.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
I'll put a plug out to Calls on Call there. Matter of fact, we pretty strongly considered that because it's expensive to have somebody to answer the phone all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And we've actually gone to an auto attendant that at least helps route that call to the right person. But we do everything we can to still have a human answer the phone if at all possible.
Mm-hmm.
And so I hired a gal because I felt it was very important when a customer calls.
Mm-hmm.
Even today, you can still see when we have people call in, they go to the auto attendant and they leave a 0-second message.
Yep.
And it's like, hey, they're going to call somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
So
next in line, right?
So matter of fact, we because of caller ID, we actually. If we don't get to that call, I've instructed my staff to call every one of those people back.
Okay.
And it's amazing
that,
they're like, wow, you guys care. You call your customers back.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been, I feel pretty strongly about that. I think it's
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Nice. So then you added the receptionist. Was that a tough sell to her? Saying, hey, I got this business. It's in my house. I'm going to be gone. Hustling calls here and there.
Nope, she loved it. It was, she was a very. She actually worked for us at Kestrel.
Oh, gotcha.
So I knew her.
So easy sell.
Yep, easy sell. And so she worked with me for probably 10 years, I'd say.
Oh wow, nice. So at what point did you move out of your house and into a building of some kind?
That would have been about 15 years ago.
Okay.
So, we moved in. Friend of mine, Paul Vitucci, who owns Redline Mastercraft. And I happen to be a lifelong water skier. I water skied professionally for my early years.
Oh, nice.
So he was opening up a new location in McFarland, and he offered to, it was a pretty big space. I think it was about a 10,000 square foot building that he was leasing. And he didn't need it all, so he said, "Hey, why don't you come open up in here?" So we carved out a little. There was actually already a front office from the previous business, and so we moved in there, did a little bit of remodeling, and started adding people.
Gotcha. So you've been in that same spot for 15 years.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yep.
Okay. So you've seen some changes there. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow, I had no idea that you were in there that long. All right.
Yeah, we've remodeled it, and we've turned it from just literally office space into a showroom. One of the requirements of being an Apple Premier partner is having a minimum square footage, as well as a sales volume that you have to do per location. But they, Apple wants, and they actually, control what your store can look like. They have to approve all the plans. They want it to be Apple-like, but not too Apple-like. Like, for example, we can't use the same maple top tables that they use in the Apple store.
Because then people would confuse you, essentially?
Apple doesn't want people confused thinking that you're an Apple store.
Sure.
They want you to have your own identity, which which we've done.
Sure. That's good that there's a little bit of freedom there.
Yeah.
Even if a little something. That's funny. Okay. Yeah. So Tell me, you chose that spot in McFarland. It was more for convenience?
It was more for affordability.
Okay, that's fair. Totally fair.
It was as opposed to a tradition. And at that time we had really no interest in retail either.
Sure.
The retail didn't come for several years after that. So we were primarily just focused on business to business support.
Okay.
And whenever we could sell products, we were doing that.
Sure.
It was a nice service that we could offer our clients. Is that in addition to getting all the support, we can acquire all this stuff for you, put it together, assemble it, test it, and then bring it on site.
Sure.
So it saves that customer a lot of time of having to do all that.
Sure.
On causing them downtime.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's awesome. So is it tough finding, like, for you getting Macintosh part or Apple parts? Like, Macintosh isn't even a thing, right? So Apple parts.
Oh, Macintosh is still a thing.
They are, okay.
Yeah. If you go to their website, Mac is still, pretty prominent in the thing. So yeah, all of the computers from Apple are Macs. And
gotcha.
Then,
okay.
Then everything else, of course, their big money maker is the iPhone.
Yeah.
But,
I think that helped them get to $1 trillion.
oh yeah, that was the sole reason they're a $1 trillion company. Yeah.
Yeah, I was looking at some numbers there, and it's interesting. Just it's staggering the dollar amount for something that essentially created an industry. I mean, industry that was going to be created somehow, right? But
right.
You look at what Google's doing with the Android, what Apple's doing with the iPhone, and any other stragglers there.
Oh yeah.
BlackBerry. I don't know if they're still around.
Yeah. But it's amazing. Would you have thought a few years ago that you'd be spending $1,000 for a phone?
No,
that's
no.
But
I was frustrated at 500, which is it's kind of funny, right? Because it just shows you where our perspective is, right?
Right. Yeah. After this last, the rollout earlier this week is like, I didn't even blink at the phone costing $1,000. It does so much for you.
That's the thing, right?
It disrupted so many industries.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when was the last time you pulled out a map when you're driving in a car to try to navigate?
I was thinking about that just the other day because I was using this app and it had this. In the end, I was trying to push too many buttons faster than the phone wanted to process my button pressing, all this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So you end up with a lot of clutter. Because with a map, you have scale. From a size point of view, you can, it's a few feet by a few feet. Mm-hmm. You can see where you want to go and where you've been, and it's all good.
You see the options a little better. Yeah, I mean, mapping technology is not perfect, but I mean, on a daily basis, I'm guessing most of us rely on it. I mean, like I had, didn't even dawn on me to look and see where this place was. I just, once I got in my car, I'm going, hey Siri, take me to, 1350 Linderud Drive.
Yeah.
Boom.
Yep.
I'm
just
there.
Like that. No, I totally understand. I hit the little traffic button every day on my way into work to figure out which way do I need to take so I'm not stuck. Mm-hmm. And it's seconds, right?
Yeah.
And you don't even think about it.
Right.
But then you look at the price tag, you're like, $1,000? What are you talking about, right? When realistically, it wasn't really that long ago that to get the computing power alone that we have in our pocket. Yeah,
they were at the rollout. They were talking about trillions of transistors in one chip on this phone, and the amount of the amount of processing power is just mind-boggling.
Staggering.
What it'll do.
Super cool. So I get that. So it's interesting. I think maybe I flinch a little bit at the price, just because when it comes down to your screen breaking or something like that, I know there's going to come a time when people are just going to drop their phone or they're going to lose their phone or something, and then they got to deal with buying a $1,000 phone again.
Yeah. Well, Apple has just recently, so they have Apple Care Plus.
Okay.
And so it's very affordable. I think it's $99 on most phones, $69 to $99.
Okay.
And that includes 2 incidents of accidental damage.
Okay.
So if you drop and crack your phone, you come in and it's $49 to have your screen replaced.
Gotcha.
As opposed to having to buy a new phone or $300 or $400 to replace the glass.
Sure.
So
interesting.
Yeah.
But then it's even crazier when you look at the profit margin on something like that. Mm-hmm. It's huge, right? It's not like they're shaving pennies or anything like that. They're doing all right.
No. And I think their perception is, we've probably always paid more for the phones, but the the carriers always built it into the cost of the plan. So even today, that 12 or $1,100 phone, you may pay $500 up front and then pay $20 a month for 2 years of your contract.
Sure.
So they work it out and take a or even both Apple and all the carriers have plans where you can just build the cost of the phone into your into your monthly plan.
Here's an interesting point, because in that whole realm, right, you have the companies that have to put up the antennas and the towers and maintain those and all that kind of stuff, and then there's the people that are making the hardware, like Apple and all them, and then you have the people making the software, and the people making the money, generally speaking, from a percentage point of view, it's not the people putting up the infrastructure to make it all happen. They're the ones that are having the hard time, which is why we probably, generally speaking, have slower internet than technology would allow for, right?
Right.
So, because there's not a whole lot of ad revenue going through towers and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah, and they've got to have a lot of coverage. I mean, the amount of the number of towers that they have to put up to, be able to, prevent people from dropping signal all over.
Right.
I mean, 10 years ago, you'd drive around and it was pretty common that you'd drop a phone call. And today, they've got most carriers have pretty darn good coverage.
There's expectation has gone up, right?
Right.
Yeah. So it's interesting just as a whole dynamic. Because you think of a company like Google, who relies on the internet connection, but they're in most places they're not really providing that internet connection, so they're hoping somebody else does, and those somebody else's are not approaching the $1 trillion.
Yeah.
So it's interesting dynamic that way. Same thing with electricity and all that jazz, right? So,
yeah, I mean the big difference between Apple and Google is Apple provides the hardware, so they're making the money on the hardware, so they don't need to extract data, whereas Google, they're making money on ad revenue, so they're going through everything, that all of their services, whether it's Gmail or your Google searches, they're scouring that data, they claim autonomously, but they're taking that data and they're turning around and selling that information to advertisers.
Sure.
Whereas Apple tends to take security and privacy to another level. And they really respect people's privacy and the ability to, now they have to with things like the watch and the ability to do a EKG by holding a button for 30 seconds on your watch.
That is way too big brother for me. Way too big brother.
Yep. But I mean, if it can detect, certain people having a heart malfunction, I guarantee you when I get my Watch 4, I'm going to do an EKG and see what things look like.
Sure. No, I understand that. Yeah, for someone like my mom, I can totally understand that.
Yeah. The other neat feature in the new phone is the fall technology. So because of the accelerometer in the phone or in the watch, it can detect a fall, whether backwards or forward. And if you fall and you stay down for a minute, it will automatically call for help. So it'll call 911.
Sure.
And hopefully save some lives that way too.
Sure. Interesting. Huh. Clever. What technology can do.
Another industry that they're going to disrupt. The help, I've fallen, I can't get up.
Right.
That little service is probably, I don't know what they pay for that, but it's probably $20-$30 a month at least. Buying the device.
Sure.
And now a watch is going to provide that service. Obviously the watch is going to cost a little more upfront.
Sure.
But having that service on your wrist at all times.
I'm just picturing some old lady falling down and trying to figure out how do we fast forward this? I'm hurt. I need help now.
Literally all you have to do is hold the crown and it'll automatically.
Oh really? Okay.
It'll automatically dial 911 for you.
Gotcha. Okay. So, I didn't know if they got rid of buttons or something like that. Just wave your eyes in front of it or something like that.
And now there's voice recognition. A lot of the stuff we sell. So we're also we also sell Sonos, which is a speaker system.
Okay.
Works integrated with Apple very well. It's a wireless speaker system.
Okay.
And has voice control in it. So I have voice control now where I can, if I'm watching TV, I can literally go, "Hey Siri, find a movie with Tom Hanks on it on Netflix."
Sure.
And it will go and search Netflix, bring up all the Tom Hanks movies, and give me a choice, as opposed to sitting there thumbing through all the movies to figure out what I want to watch. Now I can just ask Siri a couple of quick questions and have the answer at my fingertips.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because the other day I found myself with an extra 10 minutes of time, which is rare. And I figured, hey, let me just turn on TV and find something. I spent 10 minutes searching for what to watch because I was so used to just channel surfing where you can just say no. Now you can actually like the world's at your fingertips. Just tell us fingertips. I should say. Just tell us what you want to hear, and there's nothing to hear because you gotta.
Oh, that was my phone when I said, "Hey Siri."
Technology bitch is back.
Oh.
That's funny. What do you want?
Yeah.
Okay, why don't you what's your website?
Website is www.graphiteas, as in Graphite Apple Specialist, so graphiteas.com.
Sure. Awesome. And how about a phone number?
That would be 838-6650.
All right.
And we will do our best to have a human answer that
Nice,
number.
you better, right? So let's downshift into the business side of things.
Okay.
You've seen 22 years, you've seen a lot of stuff.
Yep.
From technology changes to economy changes to just the perception of Apple as a brand to, I imagine, the hoops that Apple has made you deal with and all that jazz. There's just been changes. So what have been some unforeseen changes that were kind of the biggest hiccups that you had to deal with?
One of them was almost getting deauthorized. So
that'd be a big one.
Yes. So, of course, Apple has a bunch of, we don't want to call them bean counters, but,
Sure.
Consultants and
Sure.
accountants within the company. And for some reason, out of the blue, they just said, no, we don't need this guy in Madison anymore to do service because we have an Apple store there.
All right.
And so I had several customers, including Madison Area Technical College, that we did a lot of service for. Now, this was just the service side of things.
Sure.
But the two, service and sales, go so hand in hand that I think had I lost one, probably would have lost the other. Not too far behind. But I had several customers that really stuck up for us, and our one main contact at MATC, now Madison College, he actually wrote letters to his Apple reps because he's in the he had reps within the Apple Education Channel, and he actually wrote an email to Tim Cook.
Oh, nice.
And he was pretty mad that they were gonna do this because we had done such a great job of servicing all their computers. And so about the day of the deadline when I was going to lose my authorization, I got a call from Apple and said, hey, we're going to reinstate you for a 6-month trial, and you have to, part of what we did is we were so focused on doing whatever was necessary to get the customer back up and running that we were missing a few metrics.
Okay.
And so Apple measures us on metrics. So for example, if you were to bring in a phone and we had to replace the battery and the screen, we'd get divided because there was a 2-part repair.
Okay.
So regardless, it was something totally beyond our control. But if we had to put 2 parts in a computer, we would get, that would be a knock against us.
Interesting.
And so it was just the ratio of the number of computers that we were repairing, which we were a smaller shop at the time.
Sure.
And so the volume wasn't there to offset their metrics. They had some guy that came in from Dell that put in this metrics program, and I was a busy business owner and I wasn't really paying attention to it. All I was looking at was the customer satisfaction scores, which were perfect.
Okay.
We were literally 100% on our customer satisfaction scores.
Sure.
And our turnaround time was, as they told me later, was too good to be true. They're like, you've got to be cheating. You can't. There's nobody that's doing a 24-hour turnaround.
Sure.
And we're like, no, we are.
Right.
We're getting the machine in. We're getting the part ordered. Parts arrive the next day, and we were getting that machine back to the customer within 24 hours.
Sure.
On average, and Apple couldn't believe it. And now they are pointing other people to us as the model to follow for how to how to maintain customer satisfaction. Yeah.
Nice.
Yep.
So you just send a bill to Apple every once in a while for consulting?
I wish. I wish.
Nice. So you mentioned when you started your business that you had a couple of young boys.
Yes.
So were you married at the time?
I was.
Okay. And how did your wife go about with you saying, hey, I'm going to start this business?
She was great because the boys could stay at home. We didn't have to put them in daycare.
Sure.
So we literally hired a nanny to come into the house and take care of them. And we lived on a lake, so I could pop out and go water skiing every once in a while with them and stuff like that. So I had a little more flexibility in my schedule back then than I do now.
So as the business grew, was she still okay with that? Or?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. She actually worked for Apple. At the time.
Oh, really?
So, yeah.
Okay.
So, and we had to keep things, back then it was, the Apple was pretty concerned about conflicts of interest and stuff like that, but she worked in the education channel.
Okay.
And we can't really do anything in the education channel.
Sure.
Other than service.
Okay.
So, wasn't too bad of a deal.
Okay. Not so bad at all then. What has been your favorite thing about owning your business?
Favorite thing is the flexibility. I still work way too much. I'm hoping to at some point that we can kind of change that. But
sure.
Just the ability to really help customers, and my employees will tell me that I spend way too much time with various customers. They get kind of a preferential treatment when they just happen to get me in the
sure.
But now they're doing everything they can to keep me out of the front of the store because, where a transaction could be completed in an hour, perhaps sometimes I'll take 2 or 3 hours and really, really show that end user what they're getting into.
Sure, and that's a long transaction.
Yes, it is.
Nice. Do you have a favorite customer story?
Favorite customer story. Yeah. All my customers are favorites.
There's bound to be that one that you saved payroll or something like that.
I've got a least favorite customer story.
Fair.
No, this was just something that you have to be very careful of in the in communications with a customer.
Sure.
We had a husband and wife, and they had a son that came in, and young, kind of college age child. And they had come in 2 or 3 different times, and my employees had talked to them about the different things with Apple Care. Mm-hmm. So they were shopping for both an iPad and a Mac.
Okay.
And for different purposes, and
sure.
they ended up. So at the time, Apple Care had 2 different plans.
Okay.
Apple Care Plus on the iPhone or the iPad covered accidental damage.
Okay.
And Apple Care on the Mac didn't cover accidental damage.
All right.
So
you shouldn't be dropping that anyways, right?
Theoretically, but I mean, we get a lot of liquid spills on laptops.
Oh, gotcha.
People are drinking a Coke or whatever. So they had been in, everything went well. They left, and about 2 weeks later, they come back in and they said, you told us that anything that happens to this is covered.
Sure.
And the son had spilled a Coke on the keyboard of the laptop.
Okay.
And it was, anytime you do that, it's about $1,000 or $1,200 repair. Because you basically,
it's a couple bucks. Sure.
It's a mail back into Apple, and Apple basically takes it apart and refurbishes it. They put new, because it goes through the keys, the liquid gets on the logic board.
Sure.
It fries it out.
All right.
Starts growing, coral on top of the top of the computer.
Game over.
And so we ship those back to Apple. They pull all the parts out. Mm-hmm. Anything where water touched, they replace the part. But this customer got pretty frustrated because his perception was that, you told us that this would cover, accidental damage.
Sure.
And we're like, no, we told you the iPad would, but he,
gotcha. Okay.
he didn't believe us, and accused us of lying to him, which I finally had to take out the security video and show him that no, we actually did say this.
Oh, really?
And
that's okay.
So, but he still went to Apple, and Apple, authorized him to get that repair done for free.
Wow.
So,
okay. All right. Well, they got the funds to do that. Not everybody else does.
Yes,
right?
Correct.
We're $1 trillion. What do you want from us? Interesting.
Yeah.
So where do you see Graphite going in the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, we're really focusing on growing our support business right now.
Okay.
So we're putting a lot of systems. We're moving into what's called managed services. So it's essentially a client that gets installed on the computer.
Sure.
And we're able to control when software updates get done, if software. So for example, Apple's coming out. We're now on 10.13. 10.14 is coming out end of September.
Oh, wow.
A lot of our customers, we don't want them to upgrade. Customers kind of get in the habit of every time a pop-up comes up on the screen. Sure, go ahead, do
Sure.
it, install it. Well, this could cause a lot of problems if you install that. So we can actually, through the use of this client, block people from upgrading. We
Gotcha.
can stop them.
Sure.
So our business clients really like that.
Sure.
That we can
You let
kinda,
the other people do the beta testing.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah.
We'll wait a couple of point upgrades before we push
Yep.
this out, or we can test it on a machine.
Sure.
Make sure that all the software that they're using is compatible. Mm-hmm. So things like that. So that's kind of the area that we're moving into.
Okay.
Where we've got customers paying us on a monthly basis, on a per machine basis.
Sure.
For managing all aspects of their.
Gotcha. So everybody's
of their
happy.
Mahnke.
Everything's
Yep.
taken care of. It's all
Yep.
good. All right. So you can
And-
remote if you need to and
Correct.
fix somebody's problem without
Yep.
having to make a trip.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
So downtime is minimized.
Correct.
Gotcha. That's
Yep.
awesome.
Yep.
And how long do you plan on sticking around in the business?
Oh, I probably got at least 5 more years left.
Okay.
And
Your employees are like, take a vacation.
well, yeah, I've got a guy that I'm pretty confident in taking over.
Okay.
So we're
Like he'll buy the business.
if we're not quite sure whether Apple will actually allow the sale of the business.
Oh, interesting.
But
okay. And
so
marginally frustrating.
yeah, so I may still have some some interest in
Sure.
it. But he'll definitely be running it.
Okay.
Hopefully I can kind of start scaling away. But we got a pretty big task ahead of us with building the support end of things. And
Sure.
then we are looking at other locations as well. Apple,
Nice.
Apple Service in particular is really pushing us to open up in there's really limited coverage in areas of Milwaukee.
Gotcha.
The Simply Mac closed in Rockford, so there's Rockford's a pretty good sized city.
It is.
A
lot of iPhones there.
Yeah, so a lot of those customers are driving up to see us, or having to go to
Sure.
a place like a Best Buy, which
Gotcha.
is not typically real service oriented.
Right. Interesting. Well, that's awesome. So
Yeah.
you got a clear road in front of you. You just got to get a lot of work done.
lot of opportunity. It's
Sure.
just it's finding the time, the resources, and the money to make sure it's going to go the right
Man,
way.
you solve all 3 of those, you can do anything you want. Cool. Well, thanks, Bob. I appreciate you stopping by.
Okay.
This has been awesome.
All right, yeah.
This has
Enjoyed
been This has been Authentic Business Adventures, the business program that brings you the struggles, stories, and triumphant successes of business owners across the land. Coming to you from the Sun Prairie Community Studios, underwritten by Bank of Sun Prairie. My name is James Cademan, business coach at Droughton Customers Business Coaching, owner of Calls on Call Shared Receptionist Services, and author of the Bold Business Book, available on Amazon. We'd like to thank you, our wonderful listeners, as well as our guest, Bob Mahnke of Graphite. Bob, thanks for stopping by.
Thanks for
It's
having
been
me,
a good
James.
time.
Yeah.
I like it. Find us airing on 103.5 Wednesdays at 1 p.m. as well as Sundays at 2 p.m. and at sunprairiemediacenter.com. Past episodes can be found morning, noon, and night at the podcast link on drawitcustomers.com. Thank you for listening. We'll talk to you next week. I want you to stay awesome. And if you do nothing else, enjoy your business.